we'll be looking at the kinds of impacts that direct cut has. Because of that, the Senate and House Speaker and President called together all of the co-chairs of the Ways and Means Subcommittee process, and we have been asked to go into the budgets that we are responsible for. I'm on Transportation Economic Development, so we have a number of budgets there. And we are to look at the cuts that were proposed by the agencies that we're responsible for, and then try to see if we can fine-tune those cuts to save the things of what we think are the most important, and to have a conversation with those agencies about how to go about doing that. One of the interesting ones in my area is veterans, and so we've been looking at what they're looking at cutting. But a lot across the board, we've got Business Oregon, all of those are in ours, OLCC, ODOT, a lot of the ones that we know and work with. Many of them do not have a lot of general funds, so it's not going to be as big an effect on them, but lottery is way down, so that's going to have an effect as well. So we will be doing that over the next couple of weeks with an assumption and a hope that the governor calls a special session in June. One agency in particular, and I don't know how many people care about Dugami, but Dugami was only funded for the first half of the biennium, so they have no money as of July 1. So we either have to get in June and allocate some money, or figure out what's going to happen in those cases. The other issue that we're getting is finding out all of the 47 different streams of federal money that are coming in. How are they being spent by those agencies, so we know which agencies are taking the biggest hit by not having any resources coming to them. So we will try to readjust and look at those budgets over the next 2 to 3 weeks, so that we can be ready if there is a special session to be called. Number two, and the most urgent one, is today at 1 o'clock. We have an emergency board meeting. As you know, Washington and Idaho and many of the other states have already started dispersing the money from the CARES Act to local governments and others. Oregon has not done that to this point, and the governor, I think, believes, and I think rightfully so, that the legislature has to have a part in that. So we're having an e-board meeting today to do an allocation of the $1.36 billion that the state has been given. It's set up in 4 little tranches, $450 million for state expenses, $415 million for local governments and tribes, $300 million for new programs, which is unspecified and makes us a little nervous, and $225 million for reserves, for a total of $1.39 billion is going to be allocated today for the use by those agencies to distribute. So with that comes a number of other pages of information, and I would encourage all of you to go and look at that information. It's on OLIS under materials for today's e-board meeting, and you can also watch the e-board meeting live from 1 to 3. There are 3 coastal representatives, so I think that's positive for us. Betsy Johnson, myself, and David Gomberg are all on the e-board, and we have a number of questions regarding how the distribution is going to happen, and how do we make sure that not only is population a consideration, but also those of us that have been hit the hardest. And if you look at the coast, because tourism is such a big part and because the money that comes in from the taxes on tourism actually funds some of our local governments completely. So Toledo and a couple of these other smaller cities have no tax base. So their only tax base is the money they get from those taxes, which have been non-existent lately. So figuring out a budget for some of those is really important. And we have been having conversations with Oregon League of Cities that also looked at the criteria and felt that the federal treasury gives a little bit more discretion to cities than what our guidance is, and so we'll have questions about that to try to figure out what's going on. And during the e-board meeting today, the other thing is that 3 municipalities and or governments were given the money directly, and that was because they had over 500,000 population. So Washington, Multnomah, and Portland itself, the 2 counties and the one were in that group, so they got their money up front. The difference is that their chief executive is responsible for how the money is spent. So if the federal government believes that when you send in your collection or how you spent the money, if you didn't do it in the way that they prescribed for you, they will ask for the money back. The governor is clearly the one that's on the hook for all of the state money. It came to the executive branch how she spends it and how she gets the information back to the federal government, how it was spent, is solely on us. So that's one of the reasons she's been a little leery about sending out the money, because it needs to have the receipts. So there's a conversation going on of whether or not it should be a reimbursement only. You send in the receipts, we look it over to see if it was done. That's going to be a conversation on today's issue as well. And I think that's a little harder for some of our coastal counties because they don't have the money in the first place to spend it and then get it reimbursed. So we're going to have a conversation about all of those things on the board today, and try to get some answers for you. And then the one that's the 300 for new programs, it does not specify what those new programs are, and I think there'll be a number of questions about those as well. But at least at the end of today, I expect that a bunch of this money will be taken. It'll be given to the agencies to disperse, or so some of it will be unscheduled, but most of it will be scheduled to go out. And when that's all said and done, we need to watch very carefully and make sure that the areas that, from my perspective, I represent are well represented in the distribution of those funds. So we will continue to watch it going forward. That's kind of the whole meeting for this e-bird. It's only about those 4 items or 3 items, and there's also a letter in the materials from the governor that explains part of the process and why the metro counties aren't getting much. There's a number of people who are very concerned rurally that Clackamas County, which is the next largest population county, is going to want all the money. So we're going to have to watch carefully to see how that distribution and what the formulas might be with respect to how it's going to be distributed. So that's an update on what's happening at the state level. And congratulations on reopening and all the stuff you guys have done. You've done a very good job, and I hope that people in our community are really listening, because I think the things that I've heard from John and from Melissa, from everybody about being responsible, recognize that people like me who are over that 65 and have underlying conditions are a little nervous about being around people coughing, and even those that we don't know that might have it. Well, I always wear a mask, and I know that I'm wearing the mask for other people, and that's the responsible thing to do. And I hope that people out there who watch these and are listening are understanding that it's not about you. You may be brave and think you're tough and you can go out there without a mask, but the issue is you are exposing others of your friends and neighbors if you don't take those precautions. And I really hope that people use that common sense that Oregonians generally have and coastal people have to be kind to your neighbors and to recognize it's not about me, it's about the other person standing next to you in the line who is very nervous about being out there. And if we really want our communities to open up and people to visit hotels and restaurants and other kinds of things, they have to feel safe that they're going there. And you make the difference, individual citizens, not all the things that the hotels and the restaurants are doing. So keep that patience in mind and recognize that you're helping each other by taking care of yourself and doing it right. So thank you for the time to talk.
Thanks, Senator. I had a question yesterday about the governor's reluctance to pass the CARES Act funding through directly and then just audit us. I mean, that happens already on a lot of funding we get, where the contract or the funding agreement says that, we have to repay it if it's not spent correctly. Why wouldn't you just do a mechanism like that again?
It's a good question, and I don't have an answer for that. I know that the Ways and Means people have been talking a lot about the process, and we're going to find more about that today, but I do not know why that was not one of the considerations, because I think that can work, but I don't understand either.
Okay, thank you.
That's what's happening with Portland and those others. They're going to have to come up with their own auditing when the government asks, and so there's obviously a mechanism for doing that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
This is along that line. It wouldn't have to be an all or nothing thing, and giving the local governments a lot of say in how these how that money would be used. Even if some of what would go to each local entity were able to be spent at their discretion within the guidelines proposed, that could be very helpful.
Thank you. I'm going to bring those things up today. Thank you.
Yeah, the issue is, and you already hit on it, Senator, that we don't have a lot of extra money laying around to put out and then wait for reimbursement. So you know your district. All right. Anyone else before we move on to Representative McEwen?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I don't have a lot to add. Arnie's update was comprehensive. We are so fortunate to have Senator Roblin sitting in these really important positions. He's been on a number of the advisory groups that the governor has put together. He's on the e-board. He was on the COVID committee. So, Arnie, thank you for your work. But we're just really fortunate to have this very high-level representation for us. And as Arnie said on the e-board today, we have Representative Gomberg and Senator Johnson in the Coastal Caucus. We'll have a meeting after the e-board today to kind of recoup, but we're very fortunate to have this representation at very high levels. So be grateful for that. And thank you to the county commissioners for the thoughtful way in which you have navigated this opening. This just seems to have people on all sides of the issue a bit riled. Hopefully things will settle down in 2 or 3 days. When people see that we can do this, it can be done thoughtfully and it can be done well. And I don't need to harp on it again because it's the message of the day. But the answer to us being successful is personal responsibility and people being reasonable about what their expectations are and understanding that we do need to take care of each other here. So you've heard the message over and over and over. I don't need to say it again, but it's really important that people hear it from all of us as we move forward. The question came up about state parks. If you go to the state parks website, they have an interactive map where you can just go click on the local park and see what the status of that is. It's up to date, or it was up to date as of the 12th. So if anybody needs that, you can go take a look at it. That's what I understand that they are asking people to do right now. I don't have a whole lot to add. The committees that I sit on right now are economic development and transportation, of course, and we're putting agendas together for those committees for June meetings. A lot of it is geared towards how we're going to address the budget, huge budget cuts that are going to be coming after the revenue forecast on May 20th. So we're all those kind of waiting with bated breath to see what happens on the 20th, and then try and figure out how we're going to manage going forward. But it's going to be significant. People need to understand that and be prepared for it and not be surprised by it. That's about all I've got, Melissa, from here. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions for Kathy? No?
I do have one for you all I'd like to pose before I go mute. There was a conversation last week that, Roger, I think you brought it up, about proposing that the executive branch allow counties to have some discretion for specific institutions if the health department deems that they can manage functioning safely, i.e. the pool, the theater, the bowling alley. Those are the ones that came up here, but there are others across the state. I know the question was posed to LOC and AOC. I'm just wondering if anybody has heard anything back. We pushed the question up to the governor's staff level, but I haven't heard anything about that getting people's kind of shoulders into it and pushing a little bit to allow some local control. Anybody have an update on that? If you do, I'd love to hear it.
I posed a question to Mike Colley earlier this morning to see if it had got any traction. Initially, he did tell me it had gone up past his work group to the executive branch, but we're not hearing any word yet.
And we also got Association of Oregon Counties involved, and again, they're working on it, but I haven't heard a lot back yet either.
Okay, well, we pushed from our side, so we'll maybe raise it again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think there's a series of, I mean, we see these. There's a little issues. I think Roger's probably getting a lot of questions about the pool because I know I'm getting them. Questions about movie theaters. A lot of people think it's pretty clear that we could obey social distancing out here in rural Oregon and keep people safe and still have those facilities open. But we need some flexibility if we're going to do that. And then, of course, I also got a question this morning of, what are we going to do if restaurants aren't obeying the Phase 1 opening guidelines? And what should people do if they want to report a restaurant for not obeying the Phase 1 opening guidelines? So I gave them Eric Gleason's cell phone number, said anytime, night or day, call Eric. And he just walked away, so. I told him, couldn't Bob?
Yeah, couldn't Bob help on that?
Yeah. Actually, the answer I gave, and I'd be curious if anybody thinks that there's a better answer, was that right now, I think our answer is that local police need to go out, or we would like it if they would go out and just educate the restaurant owner or business owner about, what the regulations are and where they're going wrong. And then if they refuse to comply, then a report is forwarded to the DA. I think that's where we're at. I don't know if anybody has a different perspective on that than me, but I can't be the only one that's going to get that question in the next week.
Melissa, where does OSHA come in? That question was posed to my office about, is it the county health department, is it the local law enforcement, or is it OSHA? Who gets the complaint? And I was not sure, so I was hoping to get an answer on this call.
I think OSHA gets the complaint if it's an actual employee that complains, is my understanding. Law enforcement gets the complaint if one of us forwards it along. County Public Health can get involved, and Eric Gleason and I have had this conversation. They can potentially pull somebody's restaurant license, but if they're intentionally violating the Phase 1 opening agreement, there's no guarantee that they're going to then comply when we pull their restaurant license. So then it gets into a so what situation. And we haven't quite figured out exactly what the so what, how far we're willing to go if somebody refuses to comply. Totally open to discussion, and I have talked to other counties about this, and pretty much everybody's in agreement that we need the governor's office to give us a little more guidance on this, or at least some more enforcement capabilities, because right now, if the DA cites you into court, and he's been open about this, that's not going to happen until July at the earliest. That's not exactly a meaningful and immediate punishment. I mean, it's like, yeah, if I tell somebody they're going to suffer 4 months from now for what they're doing, they're not likely to comply right away, especially businesses that are already struggling and are wanting to make sure they can make their bills. Roger, did you have a comment?
No, I was just going to mention that's exactly how I've directed our personnel. We'll go out and try and educate. After that, we'll report, and we were going to cross-report to OSHA and to the DA's office.
Okay.
And
the DA
call Eric.
And call Eric. I'll send you his cell phone number. Sometimes he's hard to reach in the middle of the night on a Saturday at like 2 a.m. or something, so you'll want his cell phone number.
Okay, have it.
Oh, good.
We can put it on the website, right?
There you go. Anybody else on this topic? I was hoping Commissioner Sweet would talk briefly about parks, because that's also another big one we keep getting questions about. I'm sure you guys are hearing them too. Who's allowed at the dunes? When are the dunes going to be open? That kind of thing. John, could you give a quick synopsis?
I can talk about that. Regarding the dunes, as you know, last week they opened the dunes, but and I don't know what the rationale was behind this, only to guests of Riley Ranch and of Douglas County's RV park at Winchester Bay. About 35 minutes ago, I had a call from the U.S. Forest Service office in Walport, Oregon, and the lady said that they, at noon today, will open the gates to the dunes at Spin Reel and at Hauser. None of their facilities will be open, but there will at least be access to more people now. So that's what I know about the dunes. Our own parks, we had a very successful and quiet opening last weekend. Very few people at particularly at Riley. Virtually no one from our county normally goes to camps at Riley anyway. And as you know, our restrictions last week were county campers only. We broadened the number of counties we would serve starting today, so that guests and reservations from Douglas County, Lane County,
Unmuted.
County, Jackson County, Curry County, and Coos County would be allowed. The idea being that we try to restrict the occupancy to the kind of the southwest quadrant of our state. We had some old reservations on the books from Washington and California, which have been, of course, canceled. Everything else we talked about at our parks. Well, let's admit, we did open the parks to day use, except at Riley, where the day use area is being occupied as a staging area for a new RV site that we're developing there. But we conceded to have day use at Powers, Laverne, and not Horsefall. What's our beach? Bassendorf, yes. And the reason for that largely was that there were great pressures put on our staff at Laverne last week. It was a beautiful day. People wanted to come in and swim, and there just wasn't any stopping them. And so to avoid confrontation, we opened for day use with the provision that if it's overwhelming, we'll pull back on that.
Are the bathrooms still closed, John?
Pardon me?
Are the bathrooms still closed?
Facilities in the day use areas for day use customers. And again, we decided on that because we knew the alternative would be what Arnie was just discussing before the meeting started, that people are going to go to the bathroom anyway, so you might as well. We put up signs that said the sanitation isn't what we should have for this, or for given the situation, but so use at your own risk. Other than that, pretty much the same as we had last week. Prepaid reservation only, so there's no interchange between our staff and the guests when they come or when they leave. Every other campsite maximum use, so provide for social distancing. Some of our campsites are quite close together, so we thought that was a prudent thing to do. We've made sure that our staff have adequate PPE. I think that about covers it.
Great. Thanks. I'll
be monitoring the campgrounds tomorrow and Sunday to get a first-hand look at what's going on and have a report for the Board of Commissioners on Monday morning. Monday 11th.
Thanks. Have we talked about removing the barriers at Bassendorf yet? It's just created such a traffic headache.
Oh, Bassendorf, I'm sorry. Got word yesterday from BLM that they're going to open that up on Monday. Sorry, we couldn't get that done more quickly.
Okay. So we'll remove the barriers then?
We'll remove the barriers, yes.
Okay. I think probably people have been getting questions about that.
Yeah, that's a valid question. And, last weekend we had a situation where a surfer was in distress off Bassendorf Beach. Fortunately, he made it in without any help, but the question was raised that what would happen if an emergency vehicle were required to go to Bassendorf, and it would have been very difficult given the number of cars that were crowded mounted along the one little area that's open to parking. And so that was reported to BLM, and they acted, perhaps not as quickly as I would have liked, but nonetheless they did act. And come Monday morning, we'll be okay.
Great. Thanks. All right, I'm just going to go across. Oh, go ahead. Questions for John? Just going to go across the screen like Hollywood Squares and ask for volunteers here. Joe, do you have anything? No? You're muted.
No, I don't have anything. We did our visit last night, and no.
Okay. Sam, anything from Coquille?
Sure. We opened our camping and RV, just self-contained only, down in Sturtevant Park and our RV campground. The boat launches have been open for a couple of weeks, and we're seeing actually an increase of boats on the river over the last week or so. I think that's about it.
Great. Darius, anything about the fair?
Yes, absolutely. We had a special board meeting last Monday night. We voted to proceed with planning for the livestock show and auction for the fair this year. We are still looking at some of the other aspects. You know, probably the reality is a large part of the traditional fair experience just won't be possible under the phased reopening. But we're keeping our options open and keeping an eye on things. We are going to have our regular board meeting on Monday, so we'll probably have a more definitive announcement out for that. We'll vote on that and then get it over to the commissioners to review, and then we'll publish it. I was on the OFA call yesterday, and the situation for the fairs across the state is pretty bleak. There were a handful of fairs that just they can't afford to do anything, and they're concerned about the possibility of even being able to do anything the following year. It's looking pretty bad. 4-H and FFA are continuing to try to figure out how they can do like virtual shows and those kind of things. We're waiting for word back from them. And then lastly, you know, again, funding, we're probably, the Coos County, our income's probably about 10% of what it was last year. Our revenue, that is. And so we're looking for opportunities. I think it's going to be tough for us because a lot of ours is money that's donated. So, you know, the scenario where you have to spend money and then put a receipt out. We're not spending a lot right now, but we're not getting a lot in. So I'm not sure how some of like the CARES Act funding, how we would account for that. For those of you that are on some of those committees, if you can please remember to mention the fairs and their unique situations, we would certainly appreciate it. It was a tough call yesterday for the OFA. That's all I have.
Thanks. All right, John Burns with the ports.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Just so everyone knows, we are seeing a real increase of traffic at the marina. Last weekend, the boat ramps saw a tremendous amount of fishermen taking advantage of that. We anticipate next weekend will be much greater because of the opening of all waters halibut. The RV park also saw a greater influx in the last 2 weekends since the short-term moratorium was lifted. And so we are doing everything we can to try and make sure that we are keeping both our employees and the public as well protected as we can. But you know, people will be coming in. I happened to be down there last Sunday and caught a group of Corvette lovers having a big party in the parking lot because there was nowhere else for them to go on the coast. So continue to pop up. But otherwise, we continue to work. The fishing fleet has been somewhat stymied. I know pink shrimp season has been they're still negotiating prices, so that's been a little bit. And hopefully we can get back to normal catches there.
Let's have a question for John.
Yeah.
John, I think you've already answered it at once, but it might be nice for the group to hear. You were having an issue with PPE for your staff, and did you got that problem solved, correct?
We did, Patty. We were able to, fortunately, get our hands on some short-term solutions through the good folks at SOWIB. We got some disposable masks, but also we just had offered up to us through MARAD they've got a 1.5 million cloth mask that they will make available. I just put in our application, so we'll be able to tap into that. And also the Coast Guard has masks available here in the state of Oregon that we can take advantage of as well.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Great. Right. Teresa, the CCD?
Good morning.
Morning.
Things are definitely busy. Taking advantage of some opportunities to bring some resources to our region. Of course, they all draw off at the same time. So we're just finishing up a proposal to the State of Oregon COVID-19 Emergency Business Assisting Matching Fund. So our request to them is for $225,000 to match what we have already allocated towards that. CCD did a $200,000 directly. We've also received $20,000 from the city of Roseburg, $5,000 So that will be submitted Monday. We have also received invitations from EDA to apply for some additional funding to create a new revolving loan fund, as well as a technical assistance grant through a non-competitive process. The revolving loan invitation is for $1.4 million, and the technical assistance one is for $400,000. So we will be pursuing those. We have a 30-day window to complete that process. We've funded about $140,000 directly through our micro-lending COVID-19 emergency assistance program. We still have 4 loans in progress. We've got 2 in-house regular requests happening and 7 in-house SBA pending closing deals. So we're busy on the lending side. Still really spending a lot of time with outreach, helping small businesses kind of tackle the issues at hand, maybe do some planning and determine their timelines. So things are good. That's it, unless you have any questions.
Questions for Teresa? All right. Eric Gleason, Coos Health and Wellness. Demand a call if you have complaints about any public health violation at all.
I'll get you guys my number, but don't be surprised if in the middle of the night I sound a lot like John Sweet. We are looking through all of the sector guidance right now to kind of come up with recommendations for people when they call. We're anticipating a significant amount of questions regarding the reopening process and what that means for individual sectors. So that's kind of, where we're at right now based on all the happenings of today. But other than that, we're just continuously plugging along and trying to make the best decisions we can from a public health perspective for the county. So we're always available for questions. If you have any, we might not have all of the answers right away, but we can usually get them to you in a timely fashion.
Thank you. Questions? All right. If not, we're on to Terrence O'Connor, City of North Bend.
Thank you, Melissa. Just to let you know, we did have officers go out to our friends at Cozy Kitchen on Sunday, spoke with the owner's wife. They, as you surmised earlier, said, go ahead and send your report to the DA. We don't really particularly care that
think we need to do the right thing and open up. And at least partially for their credit, they were complying with what are now the guidelines for opening up in a restaurant. And of course, the DA said that's not exactly going to be one of his priorities. So there's that. On the recreation side, we're getting people that believe that the do not cross yellow tape on playground equipment should be removed, so they're removing them even after we've told them that that's still not a wise idea, unless, of course, they're going to wipe down every piece of equipment once their child leaves the playground equipment. So that will be a challenge, I guess, from our perspective, or from my perspective, not the government's perspective. Maybe that'll just deepen the gene pool eventually. So, with respect to other things, as we start to open up, I think we're going to get more and more calls about, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and the general guidelines that the state puts out are initially helpful, but then, as we all know, the devil's in the details, and nobody ever comes up with an exact question to fit the exact answer on the general guidelines, which is why I think Roger's suggestion from last week was a great one, and that is, because we all are different in all 36 counties, and even within those counties, depending on the population size, it would seem reasonable to delegate some of the opening authorities back to more of a local level than at the state level. But yeah. Let's see what else. Yes. Tuesday, let's vote early and vote often, particularly for the appropriate ballot measures. Certainly here in North Bend, anyway. If not, we'll have a uniquely different North Bend come July 1. And that's it from here.
Thanks, Terrence. Any questions for Terrence? All right. Sean Stevens?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's still morning for a little while. For Business Oregon, as Teresa said, last Friday at 5 o'clock, and I don't know why we picked then, but we launched or announced the Small Business Emergency Matching Fund, and CCD's fund that they stood up, COVID fund, is the only fund I'm aware of in the region that's eligible for that. So I'm glad to see that they're getting that together, and hopefully we'll be able to match those funds and get some grant dollars in the region. There's also $3.75 million of CDBG money. I think I've talked about that. This is kind of a reallocation of our current allocation to the state. That's been kind of on hold, waiting for the governor's office to approve the NOFO. From my understanding, that should happen soon, and we should have some information that's released possibly next week. And we've talked about two applications in the region. Coos and Curry would be one, and then Douglas and the city of Roseburg would be another for small business or micro enterprise assistance dollars. Since Sean Gibbs doesn't look like he's on this call, I'll talk. They released a business survey. I think he had 50 plus respondents as of yesterday. What we're trying to attempt is much of this money that could be possibly coming requires as an employment size, and then that they haven't received the federal EIDL or PPP loans at the time of their application, at least. So we're trying to identify those companies that kind of fit in those categories. And Sean said of the respondents, it was about a 50-50 split. 50% have already received funding, and 50% hadn't. So I think we're getting good response and have a good idea of who those candidate companies might be, assuming we get the funds. And then the last thing, Senator Roblin mentioned, I got two more things actually. Senator Roblin mentioned the budget cuts. It doesn't necessarily affect my region or Coos County, but we did have a vacant RDO position as part of those cuts. And when we submitted our proposal to LFO, they told us that position was essential and that we should hire it. So we have already filled it. We were actually ready to fill it and then put that on pause. And we'll probably announce that next week, but that person will begin June 1st, and that's for the southeastern counties in Oregon. And then my truly last thing is I've been partnering with Alex Campbell at Regional Solutions, and we've hosted 3 webinars this week on reopening requirements for retail, restaurants, and personal services. And then at 3 o'clock today, there's a 4th one on childcare, if anybody's interested. And you can tell me if you want the information, or send me an email or put it in chat or something, I guess, and I can get you that information. I think that's all I have, Commissioner.
Thanks. And those are recorded, right? Because I've directed people back to watch them.
They are. I'll have to hunt down where they're posted, but I can get that information, yeah.
Great.
This Senator Roman, I just want to say thanks to Sean. He's done a great job on the regional economic stuff too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to have a webinar that we can direct people to. So, because I hate trying to interpret the regulations for them. We don't have that regulatory authority, and we don't want to give people guidance that might turn out to be wrong. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roger?
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for those webinars. Anybody that wants the links to those, they're in this week's Friday update. So that just got sent out today to all of our people and then on our Facebook. I think the council has a tough decision next week, although I think there isn't a decision to be made, but we'll probably have to cancel the fireworks event for downtown Coos Bay. The Mill Casino's already canceled theirs. We already closed our event in the park. So, other than that, it was a late night last night. Council and the Budget Committee met and approved next year's budget, which will be impacted to some extent by COVID-19. That's all I have.
Thanks. Jessica?
I didn't have anything specific to add, although City of North Bend will be having their budget meeting next Tuesday, so if you're interested, you can find the link on our webpage and join from 7 to 10 p.m. and learn all about our budget. That's all I had.
Great. Do you guys live stream that if people want to watch?
Yes.
Terrific.
I'll put it on my council page. The link is also on the city page, too.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, can I just add, Coke Hill is also live streaming theirs next Thursday evening.
Look at how techie we've all gotten. This is impressive.
And for North Bend, we'll also have a donation hotline where if you really want to contribute, we certainly would accept.
I thought that was going to be on a retirement fund.
No. That comes next week.
Is that a GoFundMe account, Tara?
Depending on what happens next week, yeah.
Yes, don't forget to vote. Captain Fabrizio? Did you get a drought declaration from the governor's office? Okay, here you go. Oh, well, we did get a drought declaration from the governor's office today. So it's official that Coos County is in a drought, which gives water resources some flexibility on, water management issues. And you may hear from your constituents about there are some water issues, especially up Coos River, that are going to come to a major head this year, I would say, just because of the shortages and an over allocation on some residential lines. So if you get those calls, feel free to, call or direct them to water resources. Kyle.
Hi. I haven't had some microphone problems, but it looks like it's working.
Great. Yeah.
So following on the drought thing, we have a meeting next week to see if we're going to be able to support some forest protective work in the 3 counties. It's not something we've done before, but they reached out and said there was quite a need. So we'd help supplement some of the positions that possibly weren't coming back. The work source centers, we don't have an opening date yet, and they're still trying to figure out what that looks like. I mean, this morning it was bad enough we had to purchase some disposable phones. The phone lines, we can't even get a line out. And the volume's increasing. So we know there's, across the state, there's probably 60,000 claims that are still being processed. So I think it's going to keep being an issue. We're doing everything we can. We'll start taking our contractors to Quebec meetings. We'll go back to Quebec headquarters so we can meet with job seekers in person. Our volunteer matching site's starting to pick up, but anybody that needs volunteers to kind of help assist with us getting going again or within their organization, we're starting to do the weekly cash drawings for people that have registered and have volunteered. It's a $250 prize. It will scale up to where there's six prizes weekly in Coos County, 14 in Douglas, and 6 in Curry. Just another way to get some money out into people's hands, and they just have to do 8 hours of volunteer work. That's in partnership with Wild Rivers and United Way. We have been getting a lot of requests for PPE still. We had a large shipment of the surgical mask that it's been hung up in Korea. We ordered another 20,000 to go over the top of those, and then we were getting an updated tracking number today. We still have a lot of the KN95s, so we're trying to get them out as fast as we can. I know John's ordered for the port. Our team has reduced the quantity, then we did increase that again. We do have a lot of the KN95s on hand. And on a good note, our truck driving school is starting down at Rockinette Stables. It is taking its first students in CDL training starting Tuesday now. So I think there will be a request for a letter of support that'll go out to some people. Heck just wanted something. So it's not officially a HEC training program. The first 2 students are done through a workforce board exemption for customized training. And then it will be advertised as a full CDL school here within the next few weeks. And I think that's it on my list. I mean, if there's anything we can do to support anybody through this thing, please just reach out.
Thank you.
Kyle, that's great news about the truck driving school. Thank you. It's been a problem for a long time. That's wonderful news.
Yeah, this one, I mean, we've been working on it for about a year. There was quite a few hurdles, but it's great because it accesses the forest network there, connecting with Rockinette, the Rainier land. So it does have a log truck focus, but it'll train traditional CDL over-the-road drivers. So there's been a lot of interest, so we think it'll scale up. And previously, we've been sending everybody out of areas, so this is a cost savings for us as well.
Great. All right. Anybody have anything else they want to say before we go? Because we're on schedule. Even a little early, you guys. All right. With that, thank you all so much. This was great. And talk to you soon.
Everyone.
Yep.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Weekend.